Well, hey, friends, and welcome back to the Diving Deeper podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Liebforth. I'm a follower of Christ, husband to Megan, and dad to Mac. We are in our 11th week of the Bible in a Year plan, and we're going to be walking through scripture from a 50,000-foot view. We're going to jump back in to finish out Numbers. We're going to continue a few more chapters in Luke, a few more Psalms, and then we're starting Deuteronomy. Let's dive in together in Numbers chapter 26. I've got three sections here. So 26 through 30, what we're seeing is there's a second census of Israel. And then there's laws that talk about inheritance. And then there's finally regulations for vows and for offerings. Numbers 31 through 33 deals with the defeat of Midian, the request of the Reubenites and Gadites to settle on the east side of the Jordan. And then there's a review of Israel's journey from Egypt. Numbers 34 through 36, we see that there's boundaries of the promised land, the appointment of Joshua as Moses' successor, and then regulations concerning cities of refuge and inheritance for women. So in Numbers, what we're seeing is we're witnessing the continued faithfulness of God in the fulfillment of his promises to Israel, even as they prepare to enter the promised land. Through victories and challenges, God remains steadfast, guiding his people toward their inheritance. Luke 2 through 6. Luke 2, we see the birth of Christ, his presentation in the temple, and then his early life. Luke 3, we see the ministry of John the Baptist, as well as the baptism of Jesus. Luke 4, we see Jesus' temptation in the wilderness and the beginning of his ministry in Galilee. In Luke 5 and 6, we see the call of Jesus' disciples. We see that he's starting to perform miracles, and he delivers teachings on fasting, the Sabbath, and the Beatitudes. So in Luke's gospel, we witness the remarkable events surrounding the birth and early ministry of Jesus. His life serves as a beacon of hope and redemption, offering salvation to all who would believe in him. Psalm 35 and 36. Psalm 35 starts, and it's this plea for God's deliverance from enemies and vindication against false accusations. Psalm 36 is a meditation on the steadfast love and faithfulness of God, contrasted with the wickedness of evildoers. So we see that we find solace in God's protection and justice, even in the face of adversity. And these Psalms remind us of that faithfulness, of God's righteousness, and those are places that we find refuge and strength. And lastly, Deuteronomy 1 through 3 is Moses' final addresses to Israel. There's the recounting of their journey from Horeb to the plains of Moab and victories over Sihon and Og. Deuteronomy 4, there's exhortations to obey God's commands and warnings against idolatry. And then Deuteronomy 5 are the 10 Commandments reiterated. So the second presentation of the 10 Commandments and Moses' exhortation to obedience. You see, Moses reaffirms this covenant between God and Israel, emphasizing the importance of obedience and faithfulness to God and to his commands. And so as the Israelites stand on the brink of entering this promised land, Israel is reminded of God's faithfulness and their responsibility to walk in his ways. So ultimately, throughout all of these different passages, again, it's a similar theme that we've talked about over and over and over, because it's a theme throughout all of Scripture, is the faithfulness of God in triumphant times and times where you're in the valley. So we see the faithful obedience of Moses and the Israelites to the miraculous birth and ministry of Jesus. We see God's hand at work throughout all of this, guiding and redeeming his people And as we reflect on the passages, what we can do as Christians is we can find encouragement as we trust on as we trust in God and in his promises, because he is faithful. If he did it once, he can do it again. We can walk in obedience to his word and find hope in his unfailing love. Well, that's all for this week, friends. I hope that you dive deep into Scripture. There's so much wonderful truth in these passages that we just don't have time to get to. Well, hey, I hope that you join me next week for the multiple podcast episodes that will release early on in the week, and then our 12th week of our Bible in a year. Take care, God bless, and have a great cup of coffee.